As customary, I'd like to thank everyone for submitting your questions and making this video possible. Let's begin. Growing up in your neighborhood as a youth, were there any active Italian-American street gangs? In Ozone Park, you had a lot of cliques. For example, guys who stayed in 64 Park, 88th Street Park, and 210 Schoolyard. But for the most part, it would be the guys on your block that stuck together. For instance, if you had a problem around the corner or a few blocks away, the guys on your block would have your back. During your time as a member, did you ever place any relatives on record with the Lucchese family? At one point, the Lucchese's wanted me to put my family's restaurant, Spallini's, on record with me, specifically my aunt's husband, who owns the restaurant, which essentially would put the restaurant on record with the Lucchese's. One of the reasons I didn't do it was that years ago, the restaurant was on record with the Gambinos, but that wouldn't have been a problem. My true reasoning was Sergio, who owned the restaurant, owed out a lot of money, and I didn't want to get involved in that headache. This person wrote, in my neighborhood, my neighbor Anthony Ramonello was recently sent to jail over an incident that happened several years ago. What's your opinion on his situation? For those unfamiliar, Anthony Ramonello, better known as Ram, is a West Side captain and is now in his late 80s. He was convicted for extortion and conspiracy, and there's a video of him punching the owner of a restaurant. I have two trains of thought. The first being, as a captain, especially one over the age of 80, he shouldn't be the one throwing punches if need be. He had a member and associates of his crew there with him at the time of the incident. Years ago, there was a guy who disrespected my captain. I knocked the guy out in the parking lot, and my captain, Big John, didn't have to raise his hands. So there's no excuse when it comes to the point of hands being raised, and that Ram had to pick his up. My second thought is, you stated in the question that he was recently sent to jail, when in fact, he sent himself to jail. We live in a society today where if you raise your hands and assault someone, you go into jail. As a matter of fact, you only have to threaten someone and you're still going to jail. Hopefully, Ram survives his prison sentence and makes it home next year. He's too old to be involved in these type of things. When you spoke to Patty Della Rosa, did you speak about what was happening in the family and other families? Conversations that took place, not only with Patty, but with everyone, consisted of talk of our family and other families as well. Keep in mind, there was always something going on, and to be honest, you had to know the latest, as it could have an effect on something you had going on. Here's an email question. You mentioned in the loan shark business that there would be customers or people who would run away with money. How is that dealt with, and how is the person who ran away viewed? It's one of the pitfalls of the business. Either a guy goes to the law or he runs away with your money. And there's not much you could do. If he goes to the law, you get him pinched. If he runs away, hopefully you run into him one day. How was a guy who ran away with money viewed? He was viewed as the biggest coward. If you're a true tough guy, tell a guy to his face that you're taking his money. In certain periods of time, families were considered more powerful than others. How is that gauged? More capable guys, money, or both? I'm not sure how the public and civilians view power. But if we, and I'm referring to my past, as I'm now a civilian too, would ever say that a family was powerful, like the West Side, for example, we were referring to money. What inspired you to share your experiences and insight with the life publicly? I didn't intend to at all. There was an article that had a fact wrong. In fact, several articles had a great deal of information that was incorrect. But that's what happens when narratives are desperately being pushed. But the other reason is I wanted to show people what that life is truly like while ripping back the glorification curtain. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing to glorify. This next person wants to know about Ronnie Giolenzo. What kind of personality did he have? Was he a tough guy or violent? And Jerry Asaro as well. I never met Jerry Asaro. I knew his father, Vinny Good. As far as Ronnie, I got along with him. And in some ways, he reminded me of a younger version of his Uncle Vinny. And let me just make this clear. Any member of that life is supposed to be a tough guy, and Ronnie's no different. A lot of the questions that I receive, I'm expected to respond as a civilian would. Although I am a civilian, as I mentioned earlier, there are certain thought processes where I don't think as a civilian, like judging the toughness of another person. Who, in your opinion, serves the best ice cream in all of New York City? Well, it's not only in New York. I know they're in Saratoga upstate and Florida too, but that would be Kilwins, in my opinion. Here's another one. Who makes the best Italian sandwiches in New York City? Every neighborhood has their go-to spot. But in New York City, I think the best place is Pasillo Italian Panini on Nassau Street. Years ago, I was working at the Chambers Street station and went to go look for food, and I found it by accident. It's a small spot, but they make great heroes and paninis. Did you ever go to homecoming or the prom in your teenage years? We didn't have homecoming, but I did attend the school prom, which I believe was held at the Sands in Atlantic Beach. What were your legitimate jobs you held while you were a maid member, and did they know you were maid? As I've mentioned numerous times, I was a safety manager, and they did not know my business as far as I knew. Is the number of captains and crews in a family fixed, and can new ones be created? Also, is there a fixed number of guys a crew can have? There's no fixed number. And if a new captain is made that's not taking over an existing crew, a new crew will be put in place. There's also no fixed number when it comes to the amount of guys in a crew. I remember Dom Tricello telling me that years ago, the Manhattan crew had over 30 guys, and that's not including associates. Has anyone ever refused induction? I believe I've answered this before. The answer is yes. Plenty of guys have refused for one reason or another. Are there still some Italian-American stronghold neighborhoods in New York City and the tri-state area that you know of? That would have to be Staten Island, which I believe has the largest Italian population, some areas of Brooklyn and Queens, and of course some sections of Long Island. Did one of Paul Vario's sons take over his crew after he went to prison? I don't believe so. The guys who did take over that crew that I know of were Danny Katea and Al Diaco. Can a member become inactive if they're willing to give up the rackets to other members of their crew, or is inactive status only allowed for the sick and elderly? An inactive member is exactly that, a member who is unable to do the things he used to due to his age or sickness. At that point, their rackets are taken over, and in rare cases, the guy may receive an envelope here and there. But inactive status is equal to retirement. You did a video on the numbers racket and said the mob was out of it. To your knowledge, are there any other groups still involved to this day? And do any Greeks run big money dice games that you knew of when you were in the life? In the numbers racket video, I mentioned that the mob gave up the racket to the Cubans. As far as the Greeks, during my time, they had a few cafes left in Astoria, as most were taken over by Arabs. The Lucchese family were involved with the Greeks in gambling and joker poker machines in Astoria. Let me quickly remind people to hit the like icon and like this video if you haven't already. Also, if anyone wants to help keep this podcast going or show appreciation for videos like this, you know what to do. How does the mafia deal with other gangs muscling in on their turf if they no longer use the threat of murder? I can tell you that during my time, this was never an issue. You could think about it in the same regard as the loan shark business. If the threat of violence or death no longer exists, what makes customers still pay the VIG or the principal? They just do in most cases. Violence or murder in 2024 can by all means take place. But what's etched into people's minds is the murder that took place on November 15th, 2013, which was Michael Meldish. And more importantly, the fallout that transpired as a result. And let me add, today you don't have to pull the trigger. With conspiracy, just the discussion of killing someone will make the government put your lights out. And for the last question, you said in your last video that cooking is the thing you truly enjoy. Would you consider sharing some of your recipes or maybe releasing a cookbook? Cooking for me, like writing, is therapeutic. Presently, I'm working on something else in my spare time, but will definitely take your suggestions into consideration. What I can share is, make sure you thoroughly wash your fruits and vegetables. I use baking soda and white vinegar to wash mine. And when buying olive oil, just because the bottle says extra virgin or has the word Italy on it, doesn't mean that it's legit. When it says a product of Italy, it means it's 100%. All raw materials come from and are made in Italy. But the words made in Italy, there's no guarantee the raw materials come from Italy. It's just manufactured there. So keep that in mind.